Good afternoon, everyone. It is 3:02 p.m. and we are here in room 271 at 1520 Market Street, holding a hybrid virtual and in-person public hearing for this substantial amendment to the City of St. Louis 2022 Annual Action Plan. And so just a brief agenda. We'll start by talking a little bit about CDA and the substantial amendment process and what we're doing today. And then we'll go into detail about the funds that are being reprogrammed. And we'll go into a little more detail over the situation at Heritage House and the city's response. And then we'll open it up for public comment. So starting off, CDA serves as a clearinghouse for a variety of federal, state, and local funds for the city of St. Louis. We are charged with deploying these funds to drive economic justice across the city of St. Louis, which we do by funding a wide range of public and nonprofit entities to build affordable housing, provide social services, combat blight, and conduct various other neighborhood transformation activities. Founded in 1974 to administer HUD funds, and there have been a variety of evolutions since. So overall, the way we administer HUD formula funds is all through a relatively consistent process. And that is we put together a 5-year plan telling HUD our strategic priorities. We develop over the course of that 5-year period. We develop an annual action plan each year that's submitted to HUD on November 15th of each year, where we say, here are the specific projects that we are funding and the specific activities and work programs that we are implementing. We enter into a grant agreement between the city of St. Louis and HUD. And then 1 year later, or 90 days actually after the end of that program year on March 30th or 31st, we submit our performance report, the CAPER, the Consolidated Action Plan Performance Report. And what we're doing today is that we are amending our action plan. And that's something that we have to do whenever we reprogram funds, whenever we move funds from one project to another or create a new project. And that's what we're doing today. And so when we do this, when we substantially amend our programs, we have to follow HUD's citizen participation requirements. And these define what constitutes a substantial amendment. And frankly, ours is quite out of date and inconsistent. It actually goes beyond the HUD requirements. And so we will be updating that pursuant to our consolidated planning process. But it requires that we go through this public comment period as we amend our projects and whenever we create a new program. And that's what we're doing today. Now, our citizen participation plan does also provide that in the case of CDBG CV funds, which are the funds that we are reprogramming today, that we need to provide a minimum of 5 days of public comment. So that's precisely what we did. We noticed this public hearing on Thursday, February 15th, 2024 in the St. Louis American, and we're holding this public hearing today. And actually, our public comment period will close tomorrow. So you still have time to provide any public comments regarding the proposed changes. So what are CDBG-CV funds? CDBG-CV funds were appropriated by Congress in 2019 as part of the CARES bill. And the CV stands for coronavirus. So they are funds designed to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic. The city received, according to the HUD formula, $13.23 million, $13,231,362 of CDBG CV funds, and the city appropriated these funds in ordinance number 71182 and 71241. 100% of the funds need to be spent by August 15th, 2026. And I'll also mention, even though it's not on the slide, an important consideration as we think of the highest and best uses of these funds is that there is no public services cap on CDBG CV funds. And what that means is that typically with CDBG funds, community development block grant funds, we can only spend up to 19% on public services. And we know that these are often the highest need that the city residents need. And so what you'll see in the substantial amendment that we're putting forth today is the full substantial amendment is being dedicated towards public services. Again, CDBG CV funds must be used to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. They must also meet one of 3 national objectives, and that's either 1, serving low to moderate income individuals, 2, combating slum and blight, or 3, meeting an urgent need. And you'll see that the reprogramming that we're conducting today both responds to an urgent need and is dedicated to serving the needs of low to moderate income individuals. And as mentioned previously, there are these citizen participation requirements whenever we program CDBG-CV funds. So how did we go about this reprogramming of CDBG-CV funds? We started by reviewing our current obligations and expenditures of CDBG funds to identify previously funded programs with remaining funding available. And that's what I'll go through now. Well, actually, this first table details the funds that are not changing. So this is just here in the interest of transparency to share here's how the city has obligated CDBG-CV funds, and all of these programs are continuing in full and are not, there's no reprogramming of funds occurring. And so what you'll see here is that we allocated over $2 million to heat up St. Louis, of which over 1.2 million has already been spent. You'll see that we also obligate over $2 million to CARE STL for the public health campus in the Ville, which is a combination of a public health clinical building as well as affordable housing. And we spent nearly $1 million there. The Department of Health spent down $245,000 in antibody testing and has also begun spending down a substantial 60,000 funds in vaccination canvassing. On top of this, we supported our Mission St. Louis's minor home repair program, the St. Patrick's Center, Shamrock and Workforce Development Program, Southside Early Child Care Center, which has spent their funds down nearly in full, Mary Ryder Home to install a new HVAC system, Justine Peterson to provide micro enterprises, micro loans, technical assistance, and lending, the North City Stars program with Communities First, Guardian Angels Early Child Care Program, the Center for Hearing and Speeches program to support folks alienated and isolated due to the pandemic. Excuse me, I'm just seeing that my slides have changed here, or moved rather. Back to slide number 8. We supported a few housing development projects at 5882 through 96 Cabanne and the West End Apartments. As well as the purchase of a mobile vaccination clinic by the Department of Health, the purchase of disposable face masks by the City Supply Division, and a program with the St. Louis Community College to purchase hospital beds and patient simulators to expand its nursing program. And again, you'll see a common thread here that all of these are programs which prevent, prepare for, or respond to the coronavirus pandemic. And you'll also see that almost all of these programs have expenditures. They have already begun. We have obligated, executed contracts, and they are moving forward. The only two exceptions, the City Supply Division and the St. Louis Community College, were awards that were made very recently in 2023 through a similar substantial amendment process. So what are the funds that we are reallocating? We are reallocating, first of all, $256,000 from the Department of Health's youth programming program. The reason for this is that the youth programming work has been tremendously successful. It started in 2021 and was in place for the summers of 2021, 2022, and 2023. It has supported hundreds of children to have summer programming, summer recreational programs, housed in partnership with the public schools at city public schools. But that work is now transitioning in many ways from the Department of Health to the Office of Violence Prevention, which has a substantial amount of ARPA funds, which it is allocating towards youth programming, and those RFPs are open now. In addition, we are reprogramming $100,000 of funds from CDA administrative costs. And that's because we assessed our expenditure rate and determined that since these funds began being spent in 2020 and need to be spent in full through 2026, that we only expect to draw down another $118,000 roughly of these administrative funds. And so we are pulling funds from CDA itself in order to fund some of these urgent needs in our community. We're also reprogramming $62,000 that were previously obligated to the Department of Health to fund COVID-19 testing. And the reason for that is simply that while $1.561 million was originally programmed for this purpose, the final invoices and contract with Nomi Health came out to $1.498 million. We're also reprogramming $175,000 from the Department of Health, which was going to be used to purchase and install air filtration units at the animal control shelter. we're reprogramming those because HUD raised eligibility concerns. Whenever you improve these sorts of buildings, there has to be certain requirements met in terms of how the building is used in serving low to moderate income individuals or combating some blight or immediate urgent need. And the HUD office flagged that this may not be eligible, and we don't want to take any risks. And finally, and similarly with the St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment, while $300,000 was originally appropriated and programmed for healthcare workforce development, unfortunately, in light of all the other pressing needs and in discussion with Slate and the mayor's office, and in light of Slate's competing needs and priorities and substantial ARPA funds that they're also administering, it was determined that these funds were not necessarily going to move at velocity. And in order to prioritize the deployment of these funds for maximum impact, we determined to reprogram them for the following three uses. And these are reprogramming $300,000 to respond to the Heritage House emergency and provide emergency grants to Heritage House residents through our partner, the Urban League. And I'll talk in a lot more detail about this in a moment. $310,000 to the Department of Human Services to provide rental assistance to low to moderate income city residents, and $283,000 to Operation Food Search for food assistance services. And I'll talk about each of these three in turn. But before I do, I'll just note that overall, in total, if you pull these two tables together, the city was awarded about $13.2 million in CDBG-CV funds and has spent to date a little over $6 million. And we are on pace to spend these funds down in full by 2026. So next, we'll talk in a little bit more detail about these programs. As I mentioned, $300,000 to the Urban League for emergency grant payments to support Heritage House residents displaced by the extreme weather event of January 14th, 2024, including hotel motel vouchers, rental assistance, and assisted living supports, food, clothes, and toiletries. And I'll provide even a little bit more detail on this in the following slide. $283,000 to Operation Food Search to distribute free food and meals to low to moderate income individuals. This award was actually originally in our 2024 action plan and appropriated in Board Bill 131. But due to eligibility concerns, we are reallocating these funds for public services through CDBG-CV, which is not subject to the public service cap, to combat food insecurity. And so it's the same amount and dollar award that was originally approved through our competitive process, but in a somewhat different form due to those eligibility concerns. And then finally, $310,000 to the Department of Human Services to provide rental and utility assistance. We know that this is an extraordinary need for residents at risk of eviction or disconnection. We know that 10 to 15,000 city households are evicted every year, and it's a priority for us to respond to this. And I'll note that this $310,000 adds onto $3.5 million that was previously appropriated and sums to a total pool of $3.8 million for rental assistance, which we will be beginning to deploy in the coming months. Deployment of these funds has been delayed, I should note, due to an extended back and forth with HUD over the proper way to structure the program and design the program to eliminate compliance risk. It hinged on a rather technical question about whether our DHS's, the Department of Human Services implementation partner, GECKO, ought to be classified as a subrecipient or a contractor. We are classifying them as a contractor, but that in turn has implications about the scope of work and specifically means that they cannot conduct income verification services. And so DHS has had to provide alternative program design to meet that need. Now, to provide a little bit more detail about the Heritage House crisis and the city's response. As we discussed back in early January, mid-January, a burst water pipe, as well as, I should note, the boilers and HVAC system buckling, led to significant flooding and displacement of 146 households, of which the majority were elderly or disabled. While the property manager, Sansone Group, did cover hotel room vouchers through January 29th, since then, the city and the Urban League have stepped in to cover hotel rooms for over 85 households. And I should note here that the Urban League has really led on this front and has fronted funds that have been covering for hotel rooms since January 30th. And essentially, the way that this program works is that these funds that we are reprogramming here, this $300,000, will serve to reimburse the Urban League for expenses incurred starting on January 30th, but also including other expenses as they may incur as they work to provide housing stabilization and rapid rehousing services to this vulnerable population. I should note that of the 146 households which were originally displaced, over 25 have been fully rehoused and have found long-term housing. At least another 40 have signed leases and are preparing to move. But there is a substantial portion that still is relying on the city and the Urban League to support their hotel room stays. But CDBG-CV funds are going further and will also support food assistance, clothing, and toiletries, and may support other forms of housing support as well, such as rental assistance and assisted living costs. And a critical point here is that because the national objective that we're meeting here is urgent need and preventing and responding to COVID, because of course seniors are an at-risk population and rehousing them will help them avoid COVID. These displaced residents don't need to be income eligible. The national objective is an urgent need, not low to moderate income. And so the compliance and eligibility process here is simply proving their residency at Heritage House at the time of the disaster and the fact that they were forced to relocate. And we worked closely with both the local and federal HUD offices to develop this program design and ensure compliance. And that's a brief overview, or actually I think a relatively detailed overview of this substantial amendment. We are happy to take public comment at this time and also happy to answer any questions from the public. Thank you very much.
We do have some attendees. They can hear me on your mic. We do have some attendees virtually. If anyone would like to make any comments, they're invited to raise their hands or use the chat or Q&A to make any comments. There is a hand raised by Jerry. I will unmute him. Jerry, you're unmuted. You have a question or a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Pfeffer, Mr. Nagel, and other staff. I don't know you all. Just a very brief comment, which would be on the last section. I applaud the city and their response on Heritage House and in partnering with Urban League and being able to tap these funds. So, you know, want to sing your praises. People always think I'm griping. So, you know, appreciate your work on this, and hopefully you can tell that story in the media as well.
That's very kind. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay, you're welcome. That's all I have.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
I don't see any in the chat, so final call for raising hands or putting any message in the Q&A or chat for us.
Yep, and we will accept public comments as well through tomorrow, should anyone watch this online, and welcome your engagement. I'll also add that we are in the midst of, or we are launching our consolidated planning process, and welcome your engagement in that, as well as our disaster recovery planning process. And you can find information about all of those on our website. Thank you all for your time and have a great rest of your day.